stepping back a bit in time. I was in my room, working on building a surveillance system. Currently, intelligence agents dispatched by Sai and Moss were waiting at key locations in the Great Jura Forest. Not only that, they were stationed all along the coast from the Kingdom of Farminas to the northern part of Ingratia, and even at the tops of the mountains. Despite this, I was still uneasy about our intelligence gathering. Latency was my biggest fear here. Although the agents were stationed in pairs, there was a chance that both of them could be killed at the same time. If that happened, then the intel from that zone would be completely cut off. The death of the agents was one thing, but the inherent delay caused by that could threaten the survival of a nation. In order to prevent such circumstances, I had strongly warned Sally to exercise extreme caution. In the event that one of these agents were uncovered, while they might not get killed, it would still lead to confrontation and combat. That would naturally mean a delay in the transmission of intel. And that was what I was trying to eliminate, along with making this network robust and secure. In order to achieve this, I thought of using magic as a surveillance tool. There was this long-range observation magic that existed in the sorcery system, but it wasn't nearly as useful as I'd hoped. All it could do, at best, was confirm the shape of the object, which meant that the information it could provide was trivial. It could only monitor a particular place, and required recasting it to change to another place. It was terribly cumbersome magic, since switching locations took time, and if your target already left the area by the time you switched, it was a complete waste. Plus, if the target had put up a magic barrier, your magic would bounce off of it. This made it impossible to monitor powerful beings, and I concluded that it would be useless in an actual battle. But then I had a bright idea. The physical magic Megiddo was a spell that converged sunlight into high-intensity beams using lenses formed by collecting water droplets in the air. I thought that the same theory could be applied to create a surveillance spell. For instance, suspending water drops in various locations to project a live image feed of those places. If that information could be transcribed, then it would allow us to monitor locations from far away. And if that wasn't possible, then I would use the lenses I made on high altitudes to magnify the feed and project it onto a monitor. Take telephoto lenses, images, and a mechanism to transcribe information. To put it simply, I would create magical surveillance satellites by combining these three. Although it seemed difficult to construct each concept with magic at first, Raphael Sen answered that it was possible using physical magic, spirit magic, and spatial domination. Now all I had to do was to send detailed requests to Raphael Sen. Just like that, my improved magic concept had been created. Once the surveillance system was in place, it would be easier to safely gather reliable information. The potential amount of information that would be obtained was enormous, and no matter how the enemies moved, it'd be a piece of cake to find out what they were up to. You might be thinking I was just playing around during these hectic days, but this was super important. He who controls the information controls the world, and thus, wars as well. During the Battle of Tsushima during the Russo-Japanese War, the Imperial Japanese Navy destroyed the Russian Baltic Fleet under the command of Togo Hieichiro, the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet. It was said that the most important issue faced by the Japanese Navy in this battle was whether or not they could actually encounter the enemy fleets. Predicting the place you would capture or intercept the opponent was crucial. If their predictions were off, this battle would not have occurred, and as a result, Japan would have been defeated. And this was applicable to our current situation as well. If our forces were deployed in various locations, there would be a high possibility that we, who were disadvantaged in terms of numbers, would lose. The deciding factor for victory would be whether or not we could read the movements of the Empire, and make them concentrate their strength at the right spot. On the other hand, if the Empire dispersed its forces, it would be possible to defeat them individually after devising a more detailed strategy. This magic was essential for us to execute our strategy, and above all, for us to obtain certain victory. While I just spent my time talking it up, I had, in fact, already finished the prototype stage of the project. I also made sure to ask Raphael San to make it nice and user-friendly. What? I couldn't have done this myself. Don't be stupid. Raphael San was my skill, so if it was working hard, I was working hard. Thinking about it that way, I might have been working too much lately. I should take a short break to unwind. For the first time in what felt like ages, I enjoyed the black tea that Shuna brewed. As I was relaxing, I was musing over the uses of the completed surveillance magic when suddenly. Rimuru-sama, I have something urgent to report. I received a message from Beretta through the telepathy net. My jaw dropped as soon as I heard the report. A second group had conquered the 50th floor of the dungeon. By the way, the first team was, needless to say, Masayuki's party. They were taking a break right now due to this pre-war situation, but they had already reached the 59th floor. Thanks to Masayuki and his team, the dungeon was booming. More and more challengers were arriving every day, and we were raking in the dough. Of course, the challengers also got something out of this. Over the past year, the average skill level had grown considerably. There were already a number of groups that had conquered the 30th floor, and they developed strategies that took advantage of the resurrection mechanic, namely the zombie attack and the sacrifice and abandon plan. Upon passing the 30th floor, the cheap death traps and monsters that fought in groups were becoming quite the nuisance for challengers. In spite of their wicked strategies, they were struggling. As always, the strong challengers persevered. Fighters with simplistic attack habits were initially left in the dust, but as time went on, they honed their skills and obtained better equipment. Eventually, they could hold their own, too. The ability to adapt was a frightening thing, as some people became experienced enough to avoid even the most vicious traps by intuition alone. Like that, the groups fighting on the front lines recently began approaching the boss monster on the 40th floor, where they all ran into a roadblock. Floor 40's boss monster was a Tempest serpent, ranked A-. It was that black snake I encountered way back when, which took pride in its breath attacks that were devastating against groups. Many people's weapons were corroded by it, and they would often come crying to our stores. We would give them a hand by lending some of our Tempest trademarked equipment, and they would eventually become regular customers. Our store policy, you break it, you buy it, was another way to make good money, all thanks to the Tempest serpent. The serpent roughed up the challengers and stripped them of their hard-earned gear. It was such a dependable guardian who netted us a wonderful stream of income. What a pity it got defeated. Also, they had even beaten the guardian of the 50th floor. Masayuki's group was kin to cheating when they did it, so this time around, we had a party that meant serious business. They also claimed the cash reward, but the hype it generated was a worthwhile trade-off. New heroes were emerging on the daily within the Labyrinth, and it was flourishing like never before. Intelligent magians were responsible for guarding the 50th floor. In this case, I had ordered the Jayuki Gozer and the Baki Mezer to take turns on duty, guarding this floor. These two definitely were nothing to scoff at, so it would be really surprising if someone beat them. After all, these two challenged each other in their free time, and devised fighting tactics of their own ingenuity. They weren't the same berserk meatheads they once were, which probably had to do with their new strategic approach to battle. They had buried the hatchet and grown to be good friends. I remembered that I had set up a pretty sweet reward for clearing floor 50. The treasure chest was guaranteed to drop gear only on the first clear, not just any kind of gear, but unique grade gear from the Minos series. It was named after the Minotaur, the Lord of the Labyrinth. The gear itself was insanely good and bound to be a prize piece in any collection. If the chest had a weapon, you'd be looking at either the Gozu's battle axe, Minos' bardage, or the Mezu's spear, Minos' trident. There was no shield. The rest would be various pieces of armor. I hadn't anticipated that people would reach this point so early, so I'd only stocked up on maybe a dozen sets. Be that as it may, they were all top-notch in quality. Indeed, they were masterpieces created by Kurobe's best students using their finest techniques. One of the pieces getting snatched up was an issue, but the dominant performance of these challengers was more concerning. To begin with, Gozer and Mezer had become stronger as a result of receiving their names. If those two could be defeated, I wanted to recruit whoever they were from my country. And if those candidates turned down our invitation, they could become dangerous enemies down the line. That was something I liked to avoid, so I had already planned to put those kinds of people on a watch list. To that end, I requested for there to be an emergency call whenever Gozer or Mezer were defeated. That brought us to the reason why Beretta called me. So, how's the situation? Yes, sir. There were 3 people who broke through, and all of them are unique skill holders. I wondered if they might be acquaintances, but my guess was quickly proven wrong. It only took 3 to defeat Gozer, and they all possessed unique skills. Moreover, they weren't even active dungeon challengers, but rather newbies that recently made an appearance. I wouldn't have questioned it during peace times, but given the current situation on the eve of war, there was a strong possibility that they were spies who had taken the bait. It was necessary to investigate this thoroughly. Thus, I stopped the plan to test the surveillance magic, and headed to the control room of the Labyrinth. I walked in and saw Amorous and Vildor. It seemed like Dino and Vesta were taking a break today. Never mind Dino, Vesta had been looking tired these days, so I wanted him to get some rest. Amorous and Vildor were always full of energy. The concept of fatigue likely didn't apply to them. They had that unlimited child energy. As long as they were doing something they were interested in, they could keep going all day. Ah, Commander, you're here. Amorous exclaimed. The situation remains unchanged for now. I didn't know what was going on to begin with. She was probably just saying whatever fit the mood. I then turned my eyes towards the video shown on the huge screen. It displayed 3 youngsters. It appeared as though they were conquering one floor after another at breakneck speed, and their fighting style was quite distinctive. One man moved his arms through the air as if he were throwing something, and it apparently had some significant power behind it. Was this like a compressed air bullet? It sure wasn't possible with mere human strength. He was a tall man of stout build, with brown hair. He had a chiseled face and stood out among them wearing his jeans and tank top. Yep, jeans and a tank top. That alone convinced me we had an otherworlder on our hands. Let me take a look at the other two. There was a short and skinny man clad in a black robe, and another was a young man wearing a white coat over chainmail. White coat. Yeah, a white coat. The conventional type you'd see in labs and hospitals. However, in this world it wasn't exactly conventional. That guy's face looked distinctly East Asian, and undoubtedly Japanese. Apart from the black-robed man, I thought the tank top guy and lab coat guy were both otherworlders.